Okay, so we are back 2022. Some Think Movement members. We've got Jeremy Fein here and Jenn Pilotti. And the topic today is coaches needed coaches. So as a coach who writes programs and coaches other people, do you feel that that being should also have another being coaching them? And I'll flip it to in order here. I see Jeremy first. I'm going to flip it to Jeremy first. So yes, no, coaches do need coaches or should need coaches?
So as with every question you've ever asked, yes and no, and lots of nuance required. But if I have to take a hard stance, I will say no, just like everyone else in the world, coaches do not need coaches.
Okay, perfect. I like how you did that. And then Jenn?
Similar to Jeremy, I think there's yes and no would be the answer. And sometimes I think it's good to have someone to help you look at something a little bit differently, but sometimes you just need your own space to do your own thing.
Okay, I got this is such a like democratic, like I'm like, man, it's nothing juicy, there's no lines, I can't like tether it. So if I were to follow up again the same way, I would also say no, and almost like a hard no. So we're all kind of agree there. So let's take the other version. Let's say the but. So I'm going to start with Jenn. What is a situation in which a coach might need a coach, might benefit from a coach? And if you have a personal example, feel free to share it.
I think there's a couple of times when having a coach is really helpful. It can be difficult to take a accurate view of yourself sometimes. So even if you record yourself and you look at yourself and you're like, I'm doing this thing this way, an outsider's perspective can be really helpful. I find that with all things, like, with writing, you think, okay, this is really good. And then you have someone else read it and you're like, yeah, that could totally be a little bit better. So from that perspective, I think having a coach can be really helpful. I also think it can be really helpful if you're working on a specific skill, because if you personally don't have the repertoire of movements or the ability to regress that thing in a specific way, even though you've got a really big tool set, like someone who knows the specific skill really well, that can be really helpful. Like a muscle up, for example. When I first started learning how to do a muscle up, I didn't have the little pieces. I can kind of guess to what they were, but some of the exercises that are really helpful for that, someone else was able to give me. And I'm like, oh, I totally see how that works.
Okay. If I were to like maybe summarize then, a coach is like a shortcut and or path to efficiency to get a skill.
Yes.
Okay.
Or to help you take a more critical view of yourself, just in general with your movement.
Okay. Very cool. Jeremy, same?
So I would say coaches tend to value coaching more than anyone else. So coaches understand the potential benefits. I think if I look back on a coaching career, I would say a probably not unpredictable path is like you gradually get better at coaching and then think you're getting further away from needing coaching. And then you kind of hit a tipping point and you're like, oh, wait a second, anyone can benefit from this at any time in their life. And so to that end, like coaches need coaches and they start talking about needing coaches. But I would say in addition to a shortcut, a coach can also be the opposite, like maybe in line with the unrealistic view of ourselves we tend to take. A coach can challenge us to look at something from a different perspective, take on something we might not take on otherwise. Like sometimes I'll coach other coaches and they'll be like, I never would have done this, but it's a nice challenge. Like, for instance, if I wanted to run more than like 3 steps for the first time in my life, I would probably hire a coach just because like it's been a lot of years and very little running. And it seems like they might have something useful to say, even if it's not really something I want to be doing. So they can shorten things, but they can also broaden things.
Got it. Curious. So let's peel back a little bit. What do you define as a coach? What makes someone a coach? What are the X, Y, and Z? Is it someone you pay? Let's break that down a little bit. Jeremy, let's just continue with you. Just you're on the screen. So.
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't think it has to be someone you pay.
Okay.
What is a coach? I think a coach is someone who you consult in some way, to maybe help guide you or your decision making. So, I'm thinking like what ties together like an executive coach and a fitness coach. And it's like there's going to be some element of communication, talking, listening, maybe writing. And there has to be like a series of decisions that are being made, and the coach is helping with that. So that could be like a written training program, like, okay, the decision is, what do I do when I go to the gym today? Or it could be, all right, I want to get better at handstands for this hour. So what do I do in this hour? And like, where do I go? And what tools do I use? And so that can be paid or unpaid. It can be formal, informal, anything, but there's got to be communication, consultation, and some level of guidance, I guess.
Okay, I thought you were going to whip out the 3-word. I was like, look at Jeremy go. Communication, consultation, and then third C.
Coordination. No,
Okay.
I really don't know what a coach is. That's my thesis. I don't know.
Okay. Jenn, your take?
Very similar to Jeremy. I don't necessarily think a coach needs to be paid. And I do find there's this blurry line between coach and mentor, right? Because you can have someone who is mentoring you, who is providing you guidance in whatever it is that you're seeking, that generally that's not a paid, I mean, it can be a paid relationship, but often it's not. And there's, reciprocal benefits to both parties in that regard. But a coach can also be someone that you do pay to, as Jeremy said, write your programs and, help me do this thing. But the communication piece, I think, is huge. And I know that the three of us have talked about this a little bit before. It's something that's dramatically missing in the fitness industry, is that piece, right? So I do think when coaches hire coaches, I would hope that we would require more of that aspect, not necessarily that we're looking for somebody to talk to every day, but just that little bit of give and take. And hey, this is working, this isn't, I really want to focus on this. I'm having trouble with this. How can we make this synergistic?
It's like a feedback loop, both parties.
Yeah, exactly.
Jeremy, have you hired a coach for anything recently?
Not in a while.
Okay.
For me, I think the trade-off is like, the more focused on work I am, the less I want to hire a coach.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm actually maybe coming into a period, maybe soon I'll be hiring a coach based on that observation of myself.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it would predict, but it's been a while. I have worked intensively with coaches before, but recently I've been coaching more other coaches than being coached by a coach.
I know, because I think of the kids, and like there's these 3 girls who, for whatever reason, they cannot do what we're doing in class. There's like anxiety, there's this, there's that, and you're like, holy shutdown. Okay. And so basically it was like, okay, here's a space for you, like, do your own thing. And so what they've been doing, and I know they've actually been doing it because we can have conversations about it at the end. Like, right, I don't want your 20-second video where you're a snapshot, like, because they can answer questions about what happened. And, when I think about like a coach, like how YouTube is used as kind of a how-to, it's one-way directional. They basically look up certain yoga things, and I ask them, like, why did you trust this? Like, why this one over? So I'm asking these questions, and they can tell me. And then, why are you ready for a change? Because again, this is a stagnant output. So I do think, especially if a coach is with you in the long haul, there does need to be again, instead of just laying out all these steps and say, do it and disconnect, this interaction about what is going on, and why, and what they think, because that's basically coaching them to think and experience, right? If I think about like the last time I like bought I'm only thinking way I can think of it is like buying. The last time I like bought any type of like fitness programs, I think I was in my 20s. I'm 42. But I remember I got like Eric Cressy's, like, it was like, I don't know, maybe $20 or $50, or Mike Robertson's, one of those guys, like 16-week program. And it was one of those things where it was like, I'm out of school, I don't have rugby anymore, like I gotta get fit. So it's just like, great, now I have something to do when I go to the gym. But again, that wasn't necessarily coaching. It was a list of things to do. I'll kind of twist and give my perspective on it. Why I don't feel that I want to coach is, number one, I like to learn things myself in that way. And I don't have a timeline, and I don't have a goal. Like all I want to do is exist in this thing and learn this thing. Like if I try a move and it's really hard, I'm just like, that's a really hard move. And if I want to keep at it, I'll break it apart as I can. And if I don't, I don't. So I think that's part of, like, there isn't anything that I necessarily want that I feel someone can give me. So that's part of it. The second is, if I like remove the concept of coach and I just look at, people I talk to in relationships, I've got right now the people who have my ear and the people that do want to talk to me about this stuff. I've got Uno and I've got Bar. Right. And I've never been like, coach me. First of all, Uno's like, yeah, you won't be coached. I was like, I know. Well, like, if you would. And it's just, he doesn't even go there. And Bar just naturally does it. So like, we'll hang out as friends and we'll talk about the gamut of things. Like, this is like hours at like a bar, like, and again, life and this, and there's always this moment where he knows I'm getting tired. And he'll be like, okay, watch this. And then I'll like switch into like teacher mode, and he'll like give me these little things. And again, things I didn't ask for, but it's things that he's picked up lately that he's working on, and maybe he's seen it in my videos, and he like puts my attention there. And I'm like, oh, cool. So, and then for the next few weeks, I will play around with this idea that someone, just pointed my direction to. Similar with Uno, like, take a look at this, or this is how I see it. There's never, you should do this. Just here's a perspective, and then I could take it or leave it. So I almost wonder, do we as individuals, I told you mine, in our lives, have people who we feel are as good as or better than us? I would say both of those people are better than me at understanding this stuff, that we trust? Or is it, no, I need to go, I'm in my own little silo and I have to go elsewhere and through the internet and be like, wow, that guy looks great and is doing something cool, so I'll hire him to be a coach. So again, do you have people in your world that you talk to regularly that you can learn from, is the first question. I'll start with Jen.
Yes, I do. And I will say one of the hardest parts about COVID is I was always really good about going to workshops to expose myself to new things, because you don't know what you don't know, right? And from a movement perspective, it's really easy to be like, cool, I know these things and I feel really comfortable with them, and I can get this information from this other person and help me shift my perspective, but I'm not learning how to use my body in a new and interesting way always, right? Like, so that has actually been something that I've noticed within COVID. I'm like, this is interesting. I don't have the workshops to like feed some of those ideas. And that was in contrast to Jeremy. When I'm really, really busy, I want a coach to write my programs so I can go to the gym, turn off that part of my brain, channel my focus on whatever it is that I'm working on, and just do the things. But on the flip side, kind of like what you said, Chris, it's not necessarily, I don't want it, the person I was working with, it was driving him nuts. I don't want a lot of communication. I just want the program. I'm like, wait, you want me to video? No, I'm not going to video. Let's just give me the work and I'll do the work. Which makes
I don't need accountability. That's not what we're.
Which makes me a really bad person to be coached, right? So, but long answer to your question, yes, I have people that I can draw information from, but I find that it has been limited with COVID.
Mm-hmm. Jeremy?
First, a quick aside on coaching coaches. 2 coaches I've worked with who I have coached with like totally opposite approaches to being coached were so interesting. They know each other, like small world, whatever, but they had exactly opposite approaches. One was like, I'm already doing all this other training. I want you to program for me in this one area. And he did anything I wrote. Like I could have written anything down in a spreadsheet and he would have done it. I'd be like, okay, today you're going to do like 6,000 muscle ups. He'd be like, okay, I did 6,000.
Better get going.
And the other one was like, I want to work on developing my autonomy with respect to all these different things. And I was like, all right, like I just like sat back and watched him coach himself, and it was incredible. And he just like gradually did more and more for himself. And so, yeah, like I actually tend to think that coaches are really good at being coached, in contrast with like doctors are supposed to be bad patients and things like that. I tend to really think coaches are very thoughtful about coachability, if that's a word. So I would actually guess, Jen, that you're quite wonderful at being coached, even if you feel like you just are shoving them away. And to answer the question, the two people who popped into my mind in my life are my partner, Fee, and John, my kind of business partner. I haven't hired John as a coach, but I think if I were to just be looking for like a strength mobility program, he would be like probably the first person I would go to. Like, yes, I want to outsource it in your direction. And then Fee, in contrast, isn't in the fitness world remotely. And she's like, it's just always a breath of fresh air. Like she doesn't have all the like bullshit that we take on over the years of being in a little bubble. And so just like a really simple question, like, well, why would you do that? Or, something. And it's refreshing. Like it feels good, but I think it's also really educational to have someone who isn't immersed in like thinking about pronation all day.
Yeah. Absolutely. Again, the kids, they're like, these circles are boring. I'm like, you're right.
They actually are.
It's not going to be the end all. It is having that outside perspective and to know I guess that's the other piece, is like where the general population is. We tend to exist in this like bubble. And then to be like, and to meet them, I think that's the skill of coaching. If I add like a second reason why I personally am not into, I mean, of course I want interesting people around who want to talk about the things that I'm interested in. But I feel like as a coach, a good coach is going to observe, and they're going to listen, and they're going to suggest. Again, there's no dictation, but those type of things, I feel like those are like my best qualities. And as much as I know that I cannot be fully objective, I don't want to give all that away to somebody else, right? Like again, when I get up in the morning, my first thing is I listen to myself and I check myself out and I feel things out, and I'm like, what about this? And what about this? So I wouldn't want to get to as far as like a drain. This is assuming there's limited resources on energy, right? Like, I don't want to lose that for me, whether being bogged down with everything or being so successful of a coach that I'm doing this for everybody else. And it's almost like, I don't want to give that away. I think that's the best part of who I am and my relationship to my body. And I almost don't want people to interfere with that. And I don't know if either of you can relate or.
I can relate to that. And I definitely like the intuitive movement thing is something I'm really passionate about. And I think that those of us that have taken the time to develop that skill, which a lot of people have not, so many people have not, there's no reason to give it away to anybody else. Mm-hmm. Like, because when you're tapped into that, you just know. You're like, oh, of course I can do 2 more. Like, I just know. Or I feel crappy today. I'm going to roll around on the floor and see what happens. Whatever. Like, you know what you need. And that's the other aspect that I have found, because right now I do not have someone writing my programs, which is interesting. It's been a while since I haven't had somebody writing my programs. But you just I know how to write programs, so it's not hard for me to program for myself. But I find that there are days I go into the gym and I'm like, I need this today. I'm just going to do this. And it's great. you know?
Yeah, the self-assessment. And it's so funny if I let's like put a pin in that. The fact that like intuitive movement and like intuitive eating is like a thing that is being sold at like, and I get it, and I get it, but it's just like, right? Like it's like here's human, here's being a human, right? $49.95, like cash back, like it's, and again, it's simply someone being like, no, what does your body want to do? And when they say, I don't know, being able like to ask those little tiny questions. Does it want to be still? Does it want to stand? Does it want to sit? Right? Do you want to like, does it want to tense up? Does it want to melt? Like it's those like, okay, this person doesn't, and this goes back to the bigger vision of coaching. This person doesn't know what to do with themselves. I don't even know if they think that they should be like, they think they should be doing something, but they're not. So how do I get that stress between like what you think you should be doing and what you want to do? So it's always like tapping into that human side of like, these are questions to ask yourself and I cannot answer. And people get really frustrated with things like it depends, and you asking them to think about it because they want the answers. That's why they're paying you. Right? It's like the auto mechanic. No, I don't want you to teach me how to change my oil. I want to come in here, I want to drop it off, go for a walk, and I come back. Like it's one of those, you know what I mean? It's so when I think about what people are actually coaching, what coaching is really for, I think it comes back to this like ability to be a really good friend, like a knowledgeable, trusted friend. And sometimes you have to pay them to find them. And sometimes you find them on the internet and they'll talk back to you. So I guess your thoughts on the relationship between client and coach and the deeper levels that exist beyond, I want to lose 20 pounds.
I'll take a slightly different line on like what I would call auto-regulation, like listening to yourself, knowing what you need, checking in on how you're doing in that moment. And I'll try to say it in a way that I think we could all agree on regardless, even though I am taking a different line, which is that like objectively, if you're talking about another person, the two of you have different perspectives. So there are things you know about your state and your body that they can't know. Absolutely. But there are also things that they know that you can't know because you can't see yourself. So even if you're watching yourself on film or looking in a mirror or whatever, their senses are picking things up that yours are not picking up. And so that would be an argument for coaches need coaches, which I won't go quite that far, but there is always a potential value in an outside coach. And so I do coach around auto-regulation. I do think that we shouldn't just be like sticking to written plans blindly, and we should be taking into account our current state because we are experts at what we're currently experiencing. And there's also value in going outside that. So for instance, I am someone who, if I have the choice between like doing a slightly heavier movement for fewer reps or a lighter movement for more reps, I'm probably going to choose the heavier one and not have to do it as many times. And so if I don't hire a coach, it's pretty unlikely I'll ever do a set of like more than 10 reps of anything in my life for the rest of my life. But like, do I really want to set myself up for like, what if I live another 60 years? Am I saying like, I'm never going to do 11 reps at a time for the next 60 years? Maybe hiring a coach is the only way I'm going to ever do that.
That's
right?
so interesting because you're like highlighting your Achilles heel, so to speak. And you're playing that out and you're like, no, you're like, get at me now. So that doesn't happen, which is super auto-regulation, right? You're like future auto-regulated.
I think it's called anxiety in some circles.
Okay. Familiar.
But it's sincere. Like there are biases that we all have, and being a coach doesn't make us remotely more likely to get away from them. Like Daniel Kahneman, like famous Thinking Fast and Slow author, someone asked him like, so you look at all these like mental heuristics and all these mistakes we make and all this stuff, so how do you use that to make better decisions? And he's like, I can't, we're human, like that's the point, right? So same thing goes for coaches. Just because we wake up every morning and move around and like how it feels and choose things that feel good, and I know I can go a little heavier on this today or do fewer reps or whatever, doesn't mean that we're any less likely to make those mistakes in, oh, I pushed it too far in my training today, or oh, I was stressed out about work and I didn't train this week. Like the simplest things that people hire us for, we are still going to do those things over and over and over again.
Very fair. Again, and it is almost a reflection of our own humanity if we want to take it at that level. Got it. Jen?
To speak about the coach-client relationship, which is a really interesting one. So I think both of you know, I've had some of my clients for 19 years. So I've watched them through huge life changes. And the ones that I've had for that long, they're very honest with me. They're like, Jen, I am not going to spend 50 minutes or 55 minutes lifting weights or moving around. I'm just not going to do it. I like you. I'm going to give you my money. And we're going to spend 55 minutes together twice a week, and that's going to be that. I'm like, okay. But I see nothing wrong with that. I know some people take a really hard line that that's not okay. They know that that works for them. They like that they feel stronger. They like that they feel mobile. They like that, they have a lot fewer, aches and pains than their peers. So, why is that a bad thing? I think that type of relationship is totally fine as long as it's understood. As long as that's, because I'm not asking them to stay with me that long. I'm like, On the flip side, some of my clients are like, Jen, I don't want to see you very often. I want to see you like once every 2 to 3 months. Write me a program. We'll check in. I'm like, cool, we'll do that. That's totally fine. So in terms of the client coach relationship, like being able to be flexible as a coach is super important. Because different clients have different needs, as we've all discussed. Like we all have different needs as clients. So why wouldn't our clients have different needs as clients?
I think it'd be interesting to get a turn on. I was just thinking about this. Have you ever been dismissed as a coach from someone you didn't mesh with personality-wise? Jeremy, you're nodding, so go ahead.
Yeah, there are 2 experiences that jump to mind. If I remember correctly, we each, like, one kind of dismissed me and one I kind of dismissed, but I'm not sure of the exact details, but I would say they were both, it was clear that they weren't, good ongoing relationships. One was someone who came in with stated goals around aesthetics, and I sensed an interest in some other goals, and I thought they were high priority. There maybe were other goals, but they were secondary to aesthetics, and I pursued them. And then it was clear that like they were interested in aesthetics and I was interested in neurology, right? And it was like, oh, I felt bad. I was like, had I really understood the priorities, I would have just tried to refer them to someone else. Like I wasn't the right coach for them. And it took us maybe like a 6-pack of personal training sessions to realize that. And then it was like, never mind. I'm really sorry. And then the other one was someone who I didn't feel was really being sincere, I guess, with her approach to some of her own injuries. And I didn't feel safe, like taking on the risk that I perceived her to be bringing into the space. And so I basically I communicated pretty like clearly but gently, and then gradually less gently and more insistent until it was like this, we're not on the same page about this.
It's interesting the language you use, that word relationship, right? Like it's not like you're a jerk or it's like this isn't working. So it's just interesting to, again, have that bubble up as well. And I also like, this is, as I think about it, this is a really hard question, because how many, if we worked in a gym and we had like, a free session, like a startup session, how many of those people just like never came back? So I don't know if I would consider that as a firing or not, but just 2 little things that popped up. But you remembered. So like, folks, if you hire Jeremy, he really cares and he really is going to get to know you. Jen, same to you?
I've been full-time personal training for 19 and a half years. So absolutely, I have definitely had instances where either the client coach relationship, someone has outgrown it. And again, nothing wrong with that, where people are like, okay, I'm ready to do something else. I'm like, cool, that's fantastic. You know, it's great. Or, and usually this is the first meeting, I can tell it's not a good fit. I care deeply about, again, that relationship aspect. I think that if you're going to spend time with someone, you need to click in some way. I'm not saying you need to be best friends, not at all. And in fact, some of my clients, we don't really do much chatting with, but there needs to be some sort of like comfort, you know, like, okay, I'm comfortable with this person. And if I can sense that that's not the case, then I gently refer them out.
If I was to share, again, it was kind of a mutual, and most of my people, because again, I have this like full-time gig, and most of the people find me through Instagram, and most of the people find me through my performance web site that Adarian basically sends all his people to. So recently, the one that I was just like, this isn't working. It was a guy that wanted to be faster, but what he really wanted was to like know all the things that Adarian was talking about, and didn't really, right? He wanted to be at the lunch table. That's what he wanted. And so when several times I had to be like, you need to like, just this one thing. I need you to just be able to do this one thing. And we worked on being able to do this one thing. And it was almost like, no, I think I've got, it's one of these, like, I think I've got this thing you're telling me about. Do I have it? And I'll be like, no. And it'll be like, okay, well, tell me about all these other things. And it's just like, so it was one of those, and it was interesting. This was the first time this happened that I was like, hey, look, I think because you're paying me, you're expecting me to like give you this large encompassing course and answer 50 million questions and all this stuff. And I was like, look, that's not how this works. This can't happen. I cannot be your question answering machine 24/7. What I can do though, right? So we ended up this kind of correspondence. I was like, I can do is I can treat you like a person that, you know, in some kind of way that there's like, if you want to send me a video, I'll give you a quick, right? But I'm not going to break down 27 things, and I'll give you my feedback when I have a moment. And that's that. And ever since it was weird. It was one of those, like, I was like, I couldn't take it. I completely cut him off. And then I felt bad about it and like sent him a long email explaining it a few days later. And then he got back. So is this like, I can't take it anymore? Then this like resurgence of like, this is actually where it was coming from. And then there was an understanding. And now it's been like good, right? So every once in a while, that's the thing about money. There's this expectations that come with it. Like, no, you said that you were going to get me to jump higher. And I was just like, whoa. Like, well, there's a lot. So I think of this on the receiver's end, because again, when you talk about like the coaching element, there's a whole lot other than just biomechanics that we're looking at. From most clients, again, they are paying for the end result and the most direct path. But we know as coaches, for them to really get and understand this, we need to zoom in, zoom out, point them in these other directions. And if they're, again, and this is why so many people get like stuck and trapped in these like systems and schemes, is because they were funneled into something and they're like, great, I got it. It's the thing that I wanted to do. And this is like all we do. And, you know, it isn't until later that they're like, circles are boring. So that's just a kind of a roundabout there. Trying to think if there's anything else you guys, without me poke, anything else you guys wanted to mention about it, or anything that came up in your own considerations. Because I think like we always do, you know, it's kind of like we have this gut reaction, and then we have this considerable, actually, again, both sides, is like we always do here, have a case. And, you know, my hard stance is like, you know, I can actually see why. And again, it doesn't make you any more or less of anything. Like if you know, it's kind of like the next door neighbor's a carpenter, but his house looks like shit, right? Like it's like spends all of his time doing those other things, and it's like not for me. And that has to be understandable. Again, considering the experience of the day. Anything pop up for you guys on final thoughts or?
I have a couple thoughts. Or
Yeah.
I have one thought and a question for you, Chris.
Oh, okay.
The thought, let's take Eric Cressy as the example.
Yeah, geez.
Your coach. So, you know, extremely established, been coaching for decades, working with professional athletes, like the list goes on. If he were to, well, I'll step back. I think there's a common perception that there's like a hierarchy of coaching. So, you know, if you're a brand new coach, then you're at the bottom of the hierarchy, and then you've been coaching for a little bit, you get a little better, and then maybe you coach people beneath you and you would only hire someone above you, and et cetera. So Eric Cressy would be like at the top of that hierarchy, right? But he could hire a brand new coach and he could look at their program on paper and be like, oh, like take a red pen to it and be like, this makes no sense. You're missing this and that and this and that. But he could also just do the program and see what his experience is like. Like anyone can design an experience. You don't have to have a certification or whatever to design an experience. I could go to my niece and be like, I want to exercise. What should I do? And she would come up with something brilliant, probably, but definitely different from what I would come up with, right? And different from what Eric would come up with. And so hopefully that's proof that there isn't a hierarchy. I guess that's what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
And then my question for you is, if you were to hire someone as a coach, like I mentioned, running jumped to my head as something that I'd probably want some guidance with. What situation could you see yourself in where you would hire someone?
You know, and I think I'm just really biased and like turned out from my life as an athlete.
She's not going to answer it.
I know. So, man, as a coach, so the only thing that I could think about, because I'm of this new role I'm entering as a caregiver, it would be some type of nursing coaching. That would be right. Like where do you stick it? How do you stick it? Like how often? What numbers should I look for? What is it about this? Because I'm just gonna like observe this being on the fly. So that would be something, because again, it's in my line of fire. It is up and coming. There is a deadline. I would like to probably be as good as it is possible before I take over this role, but it's a relational role. So I know it's going to come, right? My dad would probably be much better off if I had all these nursing skills the day he got out of the rehab facility, but we're going to learn together. So there's merit on both sides. But yes, that would be something. Now with that answer, what did it trigger? I'm curious. How did you receive that?
It immediately reminded me of someone who I know who's a musician and only practices when there's a gig coming up and practices really effectively and has had a decades-long successful career doing so, but he keeps wanting to practice more. He keeps saying that he wants to practice more regularly, but only goes for it when there's like a concrete thing. So when you started your answer by saying like as an athlete, when you were like at the peak of your athletic career, were you the type of athlete who was like I just want to get in the gym, tell me what to do, I'll do it? Or were you this like exploratory, the kind of the person I see now?
So it was very, as I think athletes are trained, it was P's and Q's, like what is the coach saying? But there was always this part of me like, all right, I'm being asked to do this. I'm not going to ask why. That's not my place. But during this, I'm going to absorb, because we're doing this for a reason. So other than just doing this, I was trying to figure out all the details that wasn't being said, because this was picked in my mind as a young, like this was picked for a reason. Or if they could tell me if they could give me an attention point, then all these repetitions, I'm going to be looking at manipulating that thing. So that was again, just work very hard and went into, let me figure this stuff out, into like, let's just stop working hard. Like, let's just, live a good life and again, keep this thing rolling. So,
cool.
I like that. Good question. Jen, anything from your end?
No, that was a fascinating discussion as always. It's always really interesting to hear different perspectives. I always really enjoy that.
the
You know?
beauty of this little club that we're in,
Exactly.
you know, again, and as I think about it, it was just like, I was like, I've been looking for friends this whole time. I'm going to make this internet thing, and I'm going to literally, like a fifth grade, I'm going to be like, you want to come play like at somebody's door? And somehow it works. So I thank you guys for opening the door and being like, yeah, like, why not? Always a good chat, and I appreciate your time. Hopefully you'll have a good start to 2020 and in the realm of all the things that we're after. And if you want to celebrate or if you want to vent, hopefully you know how to reach me.
Likewise. Thank you for your time. Thank you both. Always great talking to you. I'll go process it for the next 3 months or so.
Totally.
Absolutely. As all good conversations are. Okay, guys, have a great rest of your day.
You
Thanks and take
too.
care.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everybody.